Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger is responding to a scathing indictment from Georgia's senators following Republicans David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. In a joint statement, they call for his resignation. They accuse him of mismanagement and a lack of transparency without providing any evidence. Writing, "This isn't hard, this isn't partisan, this is American. We believe when there are failures, they need to be called out, even when it's in your own party." Secretary Raffensperger fired back in a two-page statement saying he will not resign. Quote, "The voters of Georgia hired me and the voters will be the one to fire me." He goes on to say, "My job is to follow Georgia law and see to it that all legal votes and no illegal votes are counted properly and accurately. As Secretary of State, that is my duty and I will continue to do my duty." Raffensperger said the allegations of a lack of transparency are, quote, "laughable." He also suggests the senators should focus their energy on their upcoming runoffs, writing, quote, "I know emotions are running high. If I was Senator Perdue, I'd be irritated I was in a runoff, and both senators and I are all unhappy with the potential outcome for our president." The state's elections manager spoke to the feelings of many Georgia Republicans at a media briefing this afternoon.
We understand that there's one side of this country that is ebullient. They're ecstatic. They're in the streets partying. Then you have the other side, which are extremely upset. They're angry. They, in their heart of hearts, know in their gut that something terrible happened and their guy lost and it's not fair. And when you're this close and the emotions run this high, it's understandable.
The senator's call for Raffensperger's resignation came just hours after his office confirmed there are no extensive incidents of fraud or irregularities. And it's worth mentioning, moments after the senator's statement was released, President Trump tweeted he would win Georgia. As of 6 p.m., he is behind Biden by more than 11,000 votes.
And just moments ago, Governor Kemp weighed in via Twitter, given the close outcome and the record number of mail-in and absentee ballots cast in this election. This needs to be a wake-up call to the Secretary of State's office to take a serious look at any and all voting irregularity allegations. Governor Kemp has largely remained silent since last Tuesday's vote.